The fight over immigration enforcement continues. How much does DEI cost a California school? America's talking, and Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker urges Hilary Clinton to run for president. This is the Center Square Daily for Thursday, March 26, 2026. I'm your host, Greg Bishop. A second federal appeals court has sided with the Trump administration's efforts to detain illegal immigrants without bond. The Center Square's Melise Apel reports in a split decision released Wednesday, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Eighth Circuit ruled that illegal immigrants arrested anywhere in the United States can be considered seeking admission. And that classification allows federal authorities to hold them without a bond hearing while deportation proceedings continue. Now, the ruling overturned a lower court's ruling and followed a similar decision last month from the Fifth Circuit, which also upheld the Department of Homeland Security's authority to deny bond hearings to immigrants arrested all across the country. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi hailed the decision on social media, calling it a massive court victory. Separately, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security is defending federal agents' actions in 3 different Minnesota shootings while pushing back on claims of unprecedented non-cooperation raised in a lawsuit filed by the state. Minnesota sued the U.S. Department of Justice and DHS Tuesday, arguing the agencies have refused to turn over evidence tied to the January deaths of Renee Good and Alex Preddy, as well as the shooting of Julio Sosa Silas. The lawsuit asks the federal court to compel the federal government to release evidence. In response, a DHS spokesperson told the Center Square that all use of force incidents involving immigration and customs enforcement are reviewed under strict agency protocol. Now, the ongoing litigation comes amid a flurry of various states and jurisdictions continuing to make moves to continue attempting to block immigration enforcement. Regarding ICE and the city of Phoenix, Arizona, the Center Square contributor Chris Woodward reports the city council members there approved a community transparency initiative that requires federal law enforcement officers to obtain permission from the city before conducting activities. New Jersey's latest resistance bid against U.S. immigration and customs enforcement crossed first-term Democratic Governor Mike Sherrill's desk on Wednesday. The Center Square regional editor Kristen Smith reports one of 3 bills tailored against ICE raids would ban agents from wearing masks and require them to show identification before detaining a person. The other 2 new regulations limit the collection and sharing of personal information and establishes the state's efforts to strengthen law enforcement relationships with immigrants. The ban applies to federal, state, and local law enforcement unless those agents are working undercover or wearing a mask to protect themselves for health reasons. In Illinois, the House Executive Committee advanced legislation that would place restrictions on where federal detention facilities can be placed, but a Republican lawmaker there said that the measure may invite litigation. The Center Square's Jim Talamonte reports Illinois House Speaker Emanuel Chris Welch has House Bill 5024 that would prevent the federal government from placing detention centers within 1,500 feet of schools, daycare centers, parks, forest preserves, homes, or places of worship. Broadview Mayor Katrina Thompson said the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement facility in her community has placed a significant burden on taxpayers. There have been plenty of protests there outside that facility in Broadview, Illinois, and it's had police from across the state and Illinois State Police there to help control some of those protests. Now, the Illinois House Speaker said the bill is not retroactive and would not close the ICE center in Broadview. And that bill passed out of the Illinois committee by a vote of 8-3. The latest effort in Illinois follows a string of other migrant sanctuary policies that Democrats in the land of Lincoln have enacted, including recent ones allowing for lawsuits against law enforcement and penalties for certain facilities that don't have plans in place to deal with ICE when they arrive on the scene, like universities or child care centers. Now, today, during a cabinet meeting, President Donald Trump said Sheridan Gorman, that 18-year-old college student from New York living in Chicago and was killed allegedly by an illegal alien from Venezuela, the president said that could have been prevented.
It would be great if people like the mayor of Chicago and the governor of Illinois would say, please come in and stop the crime. A beautiful young lady was killed. We had the troops down there. Memphis, Tennessee, I just got back, we were there. Crime is down 75% in a short period of time. We're there 5 months. We could do that for Chicago, we could do that for New York, we could do that for LA, and we could do that for, frankly, San Francisco. This young lady would be around today if we were around, because we have nobody coming through our border. I mean, literally for 9 months, it's zero. It's hard to believe that that number can be possible, because millions of people came in through Biden.
It's expected the ongoing battle around immigration enforcement will continue as you've got the ongoing partial government shutdown impacting the Department of Homeland Security and the ongoing pressure at some airports leading to long lines as agencies like the TSA go without funding. We'll see how Congress handles all of this and more, but also how the litigation plays out in the judiciary all up and down the various court circuits. Now, with the latest on the education beat, let's turn to the Center Square's Esther Wickham for a story about how much one particular California school is spending, not necessarily on students, but on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Esther, thanks for taking time with us. As always, how much are taxpayers paying for DEI at just one California school?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. So Defending Education just came out with these documents, contracts between Merced City School District and various DEI initiatives and programs, and discovered that there's over $900,000 that the school district has paid out to these consultants on DEI initiatives and programs for students around the school district. And we're seeing here, the contracts include African American affinity groups for 100 African American students and a summer rap camp. And this, all facilitates over taxpayer dollars, $900,000. So we're getting close to $1 million here just for these DEI initiative programs.
Fascinating when you look at how that money's being used for consultants and so on. But, let's take a look at some of the other stats from the school district, Esther, that you were able to get out in your reporting. Just how many students are there? How many students to teachers are there? And then you look at the outcomes of their education. And I mean, is this almost $1 million helping them get better outcomes?
Yeah, when you look at, how much these students how much the school is spending versus how the students are doing, the school district, has over 11,000 students, and the teacher ratio is 25 students to 1. And so that's not a ton. I'm sure the teachers are extremely exhausted, and, in general, the country is seeing a national teacher shortage. So that's something to be concerned about. But also, according to Niche, which is kind of a school ranking grade reporting website and organization, they looked at how this specific school district is doing, and we see that 20% of students in the school district are proficient in math and only 33% in reading. And their overall grade, because this reporting organization looks at the school districts versus on grades, and they get an overall C grade. Specifically, academics and teachers have a C grade, and I think diversity got a B, but their overall grade is a C. And so the taxpayers just have to wonder, how are these students excelling in academics? They're in the education system. That's the goal. But then we're over here seeing and uncovering these documents and contracts that their taxpayer dollars are going towards these diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, but their students aren't necessarily excelling in academics.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of concern about education and the tax dollars that are used to fund these schools. And in some areas across the country, it seems they're spending a lot on students with not really that great of outcomes, where some other areas are spending less and getting much better outcomes. Makes you wonder if the curriculum is to blame and who's deciding on that curriculum. And I guess one way you can look at that is how much money is being spent on something like DEI programs. Now, Esther, one of the things we were talking about before we jumped on here with the Center Square Daily was part of this program included a rap song. I don't know this group. Tell us a little bit about this song, the lyrics there were, and maybe what some of that tells you.
Yeah, so like I said before, part of the contract goes to this rap camp, and there's videos on YouTube. The company has the various videos facilitating their and marketing the thing that they are selling to these schools. But specifically, the signature program is titled "More Than a Month." And their song lyrics, model after hip hop groups, just to kind of, engage the students. Nowadays, students have very low attention spans, and so they're trying to mix, hip hop and interesting entertainment and media with education. But as we see with, some of the lyrics that I quote in the story, one of the lyrics says, "This track's for you, every teacher and parent. You need this truth. Our history books have a white male you, but believe me, I ain't blaming you." And so it kind of has this angle, this perspective that everything that the teachers are teaching, whether it comes to American history or education, it's going to have a white male skew. And this is a perspective, this is an opinion. If there is a more conservative family or teachers or students, they might not necessarily agree with that. And so it's interesting to see that these artists are coming in and trying to educate their kids and kind of stating it as a fact, as truth, even though this is a very controversial subject, and whether diversity, equity, and inclusion has a good message or has a good purpose. Is it trying to push a specific ideology onto the kids, or are they actually striving to educate the students? As I said before, Defending Education did this investigation, and talking to Erica Sanzi, who's the Senior Director of Communications, they're saying that this spending of almost $1 million on these programs are based on identity and activism, and that's indefensible. And in this case, she says that these specific affinity groups should be illegal, right? Because they're not necessarily focused on educating kids, as she believes, are facts and truth, but just an ideology or an opinion and that kind of skew.
Well, and you got to think, sure, there can be groups. There's the chess club, there's the, theater club, there's jazz band. And those are based off interests, not based off somebody's DNA or, color of their skin, right? And I think that's where a lot of the people who oppose these types of initiatives say, all of this seems to want to put people into a certain category just based off the color of their skin, not off the content of their character. And again, I think it's an ongoing conversation that, Esther, obviously the Trump administration has been very opposed to DEI programs. How does this work into that equation, especially with the threats of withholding federal tax dollars?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, literally 5 days into President Trump's second term, he signed an executive order wanting to remove and eradicate, as he says, diversity, equity, and inclusion, because from his perspective and the administration's perspective, they believe that these kinds of initiatives and these kinds of programs are discriminatory and are wasteful. And so he wants to focus on, merit-based practices. And so just like you said, you want to focus on the content of their character. And, are these students actually excelling in academics? Are they achieving what they want to achieve when it comes to their careers and future endeavors? And so I think when it comes to that argument, I think both sides of the coin believe that. They want to protect students. They want to, push students towards the best, success that they can do. But the way that they achieve that is a little bit different. When Merced City School District was able to comment on this, they didn't necessarily respond to the Center Square, but they have made statements in the past, and they said they are proud to support, this partnership and these groups coming to their school because they believe, quote, it's a unique approach to education, engaging students in music and media and much more to kind of accept and understand that diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Now, I know a lot of states, especially states that might have a Democrat lean to it, are looking at budgets and how their K through 12 systems are going to be impacted by the possible withholding of federal tax dollars if they include DEI type of programs in their education curriculum, even after school programs. that get federal tax dollars. Some of that could possibly be scrutinized further. So this obviously is going to be an ongoing thing we'll watch, Esther, and it's good we've got you for the Center Square to keep an eye on that. One other story that deals with DEI in particular, and you can find this headline at the Center Square: National Medical School Accreditor dropping remaining DEI requirements. How do you think that fits into this ongoing conversation of the Trump administration's insistence that education strip DEI out of its curriculum?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, we're going to start to see around the country people either complying or rejecting, and we're just going to continue to see the lawsuits pile up. And specifically with this medical school, again, we have the two differing perspectives with that threat of withholding federal funding. The Trump administration has used that strategy time and time again. Some universities and some school districts have bent for that fear of losing federal funding, and some have stood their ground. But in this case, with a medical school, they did follow through for fear of accreditation standards. And what we're seeing on both sides is one is saying, yes, we shouldn't prioritize ideological training. We should be looking at, clinical preparation. Are these students prepared to enter the workforce, not based on what they look like, but how they act? What are they actually doing in the classroom and in the work environment? And, are they using critical thinking and professional development? And that's, that perspective of we want our students to excel, but we don't want it based on, their skin color or their gender. And then we have on the flip side, those opposed to this decision for lowering or removing the DEI initiatives. We have the Economic Policy Institute saying that without protected and equitable pathways for students of color, we risk returning to higher education systems defined by exclusion rather than opportunity. And so, again, both perspectives have that goal of wanting students to excel, wanting them to be successful in the workforce and within education and actually learning. But we see that kind of conclusion. Are we actually going to eradicate diversity? And, students of color, are they going to have those opportunities if we remove DEI? Or, on the other side, if we take away diversity, equity, inclusion, we can actually focus on the student itself, him or herself, and are we actually seeing them excel for the things they're doing, not just the way that they look or their background. And so it's definitely going to be an ongoing conversation, and we're going to see probably a lot of issues pop up here and there depending on the state and the school district. But it's interesting to continue to watch how much school districts are actually paying and how that's impacting the taxpayer as a whole.
And again, especially as these school districts have the local taxpayers, and they also get money from the state and the federal government, and how all this plays into the bottom line. Clearly, during an election year, I think DEI is going to continue to be one of those hot button issues. Esther Wickham, Center Square reporter for education. Greatly appreciate your time, as always, here for the Center Square. Now it's time for America's Talking, with headlines from across the country. And be sure to go to the website, thecentersquare.com. Click on newsletter, give us your email address, and you will get these and plenty of other headlines from across the country in your inbox every day. So sign up today at thecentersquare.com. All right, let's start in California, where a legislator's investigation into hospice fraud in the Los Angeles area shows almost 300 licensed hospice providers are tied to a small number of addresses. The Center Square's Madeline Shannon reports the probe, which reportedly includes an empty Los Angeles building that supposedly houses hospices, comes as a U.S. House committee investigates hospice fraud in California and is requesting documents from the state. An assembly member recently investigated hospice fraud in Southern California after suspecting that there were multiple examples. A letter that they had sent to congressional representatives earlier this month, the same day President Donald Trump convened a new task force targeting fraud, detailed the results of their independent investigation. A pair of bills introduced recently in the Ohio legislature would give the state's inspector general authority to subpoena electronic records in fraud investigations in an effort to reduce the threat of taxpayer funds being misused or stolen. Now, the Center Square contributor David Beasley reports Inspector General investigators not authorized to directly petition courts for electronic search warrants. But the Inspector General there, Randall Mayer, he said in a news conference that giving Inspector Generals the power to subpoena electronic records, it would allow them to obtain evidence from social media, from email, from text messages. So you could see how that could possibly lead to more insight into potential fraud. Meanwhile, voters, they want sweeping changes to address government fraud. The Center Square's Brett Rowland says polling and data for the Center Square shows voters want to see lawmakers make sweeping changes, pass new laws, and open new investigations to address longstanding problems at the state, local, and federal levels. Fresh polling reveals a bipartisan demand for sweeping reforms, with the majority of voters calling for comprehensive changes to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. A new Center Square Voters' Voice poll found 57% of registered voters believe governments need to make large systemic changes. An additional 37% said the problem could be addressed with a few new laws, changes to existing laws, and more investigations. About 7% favored only minor changes, and 4% said minor tweaks to government investigations would suffice. And finally, in Illinois, the Center Square's Jim Talamonte reports state lawmakers say Governor J.B. Pritzker is out of touch for spending major tax dollars on so-called community violence interrupters. These are nonprofit organizations that take public tax dollars and claim to go on the streets to combat younger individuals from getting into violence. The governor's proposed budget for the coming fiscal year includes $111 million for violence prevention. But that proposed budget for Illinois State Police, $477.7 million, including $2 million to hire and train 100 additional state troopers. State Representative Patrick Sheehan, who's also a police officer, said in this extreme imbalance for police recruitment and attention and retention, whenever you have $111 million going to community violence interrupters and only $2 million going to recruit new state police. Meanwhile, Pritzker was photographed with a so-called violence interrupter who was later charged in connection with a heist that turned fatal. That is America's Talking here for the Center Square Daily. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Center Square Daily. I'm your host, Greg Bishop, and we now put Illinois in focus, where earlier this week, Governor J.B. Pritzker was on stage with Hilary Clinton at a Common Sense Summit. And this summit touched on all kinds of things, but for the 30 minutes that Hilary Clinton was on stage with Governor J.B. Pritzker, there seemed to be some signals of political futures. So let's hear a little bit of the two giving each other accolades while in front of an audience.
I am thrilled to be sitting next to my friend and the governor, because I first met JB because he was so devoted to early childhood development, and we worked together on that, back in the, Middle Ages, and it was his commitment to children that really made a big impression on me.
I just want to say, listening to Hillary Clinton talk about what our children deserve is, well, I think I've certainly been listening to you for 25 or more years now about that, and I'm just frankly, to be up on stage with her, to have even close to equal position sitting next to you is an honor.
So again, the governor there joining Hillary Clinton on stage, and he went further than just saying that Clinton has done great things and praising her past, but Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, who himself has been speculated as somebody vying for the 2028 presidential bid, he says Hillary Clinton should run for president.
Finally, I wish that we were going to have Hillary Clinton run for president, for example. Because honestly, that's what I thought we were going to get, was real change, and we're going to get it. It's just that it's now happening at the state level. Let's keep supporting it there and then take it.
Now, watching this, some may think, is Pritzker maybe vying be the VP for another bid by Hillary Clinton to be president, or is Pritzker aligning himself with the Clintons ahead of a 2028 bid. The governor has a third term he's seeking for here in Illinois that he's got to get through an election in November. But what happens after November if the governor wins? Will he then shift his campaign strategy to look towards the 2028 election? Now, the Clintons and the Pritzkers are very close in the past. Even just recently, you had President Bill Clinton during a subpoenaed testimony in front of the House investigating the Epstein files, talking about Pritzker being on a flight, not with Epstein, but with the Clinton Foundation overseas. And he praised J.B. Pritzker for his help in those things. So there is a close connection between J.B. Pritzker and the Clintons. But you have the president and others that are critical of Democrats. We'll hear what President Donald Trump had to say today during a cabinet meeting. But first, the governor of Illinois, again, somebody who could possibly be running for president in 2028, though he said he's focused only on Illinois. He says that there needs to be an increase to the minimum wage.
We all ought to be talking about raising the minimum wage and also valuing, especially in an AI, imposed world, valuing service work and work to care for people, like just providing companionship for lonely seniors is like a job that doesn't exist today, but one thing that we ought to be talking about. And then value the work because it takes real skill to be a good child care worker and a good home care worker.
Now, a lot of this common sense summit in California, at least for Pritzker and Clinton's conversation, did focus on early childhood development, and they laid out a slew of different priorities and policies they say should be bipartisan. But you have Pritzker, who every time it seems he's in front of a microphone does criticize President Donald Trump, saying that the president's trying to take benefits away from people all across the country.
This president and his administration has truly he's put obstacles in the way after all these years of progress. He's put obstacles in the way, and if I sound like I made a joke the other night about, people have said about me that I say, oh, Trump, 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 Trump. I sound like the Epstein files.
That's good. That was a good one.
But genuinely speaking, they're taking away food assistance. They're taking away food assistance from the most needy people in our society. They're taking away health care from the youngest children in our society and, again, the most trauma-filled communities.
Now, President Donald Trump obviously looking at trying to get after waste, fraud, and abuse in various programs and seeming to indicate that his policies are meant more to take funds away from those who are abusing them, not those who actually need them. But that's some previous statements the president's made and the administration's made about his efforts to try to shore up things like SNAP or TANF or other different types of programs, child care funding and such. But the president today, during a White House event where it was a cabinet meeting with all the various cabinet secretaries, the president took a moment after being asked about Democrats and the election. He says he doesn't really care about the Democrats.
I don't care about the Democrats. The Democrats hate our country. The Democrats are in chaos right now. And they have no common sense. They have one quality that's amazing. They stick together. And it's harder because they stick together in a ridiculous policy like men playing in women's sports, open borders for everybody, including murderers and anybody else that want it. We're open to you. Come in, murderers. You know why they do that? They do that for a couple of reasons, but they do it for votes because they think they're going to vote for the Democrats. Even though I did great with the Hispanic vote, we're a party of common sense. The Democrats are a party of insanity. They're a party that will destroy our country. If I didn't win this election, I believe our country would have been destroyed by now. 1 year, that's all it would have taken. If you had Kamala or Sleepy Joe, either one, it wouldn't have mattered. They're the same thing. Two sleepy people, two stupid people.
Now that the primaries are over in Illinois, we've got several months of politicking expected heading into the November election, but you're going to have to continue strapped in because it's going to be an interesting slog through to the 2028 election. as to who's going to try to run for president. All right, so that is Illinois in Focus with the Center Square Daily. And be sure to sign up for our newsletter at thecentersquare.com, but also like, subscribe on social media anywhere you find the Center Square, and you can get more information at thecentersquare.com. From my studios in Central Illinois, I'm Greg Bishop, and you can join us back here to wrap up the week for a Friday for more stories impacting you, the taxpayer, from all across the country, only with the Center Square Daily.